I always encourage people to share their games on this channel so we can all analyze together in an environment that is focused primarily on learning and not criticism. Today, I'm honored to share with you some of the games from a friend of this channel who recently played in his very first major tournament. Gary Pollard first learned the rules of this game in 2019, and his first opponent was none other than world champion Lubabalo Kondlo, and they played games over Facebook chat. Since that time, Gary dedicates at least one day a week to this game, and leading up to this year's British Open, he studied 3 hours per day for 6 weeks. Impressive stuff indeed, and the results show. So let's get to some of the games that he shared with me. In one of the rounds, Gary was matched up against Graham Young, who is a very good and very experienced player. In this game, Graham had the red pieces and Gary had the white pieces, and the opening they balloted was 10-14, 23-19, and 11-15. This opening is called the Virginia, and it was barred for many years, but it may not be as weak as a lot of those previous players thought. After the jump, Gary decides to play the Grand Canyon attack with 22-18. I think it's called the Grand Canyon attack because there's just a tremendous amount of scope to it. So Graham jumps this piece and Gary takes the double jump with 26-10, which is the best route. And then after the capture with 7-14, you can see that Red's core is largely depleted. So Red is indeed on the defensive in this opening and in this Grand Canyon attack variation. Gary plays the natural 25-22, and then Graham plays the sound 9-13. There's nothing wrong with this move. And then Gary plays a really interesting attack here with 30-25, immediately threatening more of the double corner. And Graham is going to allow this. The 5-9, which is probably what Gary wants here, is a little bit weaker. There's not as much tempo here. But with 8-11, the tempo is back, and then Gary takes the 2-for-2, further disrupting Graham's double corner. And now, Gary is just going to continue the natural sequence by going 29-25. Graham is going to capture the center, but Gary quickly eliminates any sort of additional movement here by going 24-19. And now Graham is just going to do much of the same and develop out of the single corner. All natural moves here. Now 3-7 can be played at any point here, but again, there's nothing wrong with this formation. And this is what you saw in the intro of this video, and it's an important position here. Gary plays 22-18. Now, if 1-5 is played, 31-26 can't because you have this elbow here and a 2-for-1. And there seems to be an easier path to getting a king for Red. But instead, Graham plays 1-6, which will actually lose, and I'll show that, by either 32-28 or 32-27. And the reason is because what White can do is ultimately pin Red. If Red decides to go 16-20, 27-24 can be played to exchange, and then after 23-18, we'll just surround these two pieces, and there's just no timing, and Red will ultimately lose. Instead here, what Gary plays is probably also natural, this 31-26. There's no longer a threat here with this elbow, and white is just going to continue to dominate this part of the board. Graham plays 16-20, and then white is going to play 32-27 now, stopping this piece from advancing to get a king. After 3-7, Gary is going to exchange this piece off to go get a king. And then Graham is going to exchange this piece off to prevent white from getting a king. And then a few more moves were played here, but the game is a draw at this point, and after a few more moves, it was an agreed draw. But really, really good and interesting and instructive game here. The win was not easy to see at all, and the 32-28 or 32-27 a bit unnatural compared to the 26. Again, developing that column there and also gaining control of the center of the board once again. So really, really great job, Gary, against a very experienced and good player in Graham Young. In another round, Gary played yet another very experienced tournament player in Denis Pollock. I've known Denis for almost 20 years now, and I was very impressed once again with this game from both players. Denis had the red pieces and Gary had the white pieces in this game, and the opening they battled was yet another Denny opening with 10-14, 22-17, and 14-18. Another tough one for red because what's going to happen is red is going to have an outpost piece on 18, and white has a number of attacks to either eliminate it or put pressure on the exposed double corner. Typical attack here would be either 26-23 or even this indirect 17-13. What Gary does, he eliminates the threat right away by exchanging it off. And Denis is just going to play natural moves out of the single corner. Gary goes 17-13 as an indirect attack on the double corner. So creating a very strong column here. And then Gary plays 32-27. Now, if Denis does play this 15-19, this should win because red will go up a piece. If white jumps this way, red can jump back with 12, and then 24-15, and then we have 11-25. Instead, Denis goes for another tactical shot here, and he goes 15-18 with the hopes that Gary will play 23-14 first, and then having the triple jump after 6-9. Gary doesn't fall for that. Gary plays the single capture instead with 22-15. And after the sequence here, the 6-9 shot can happen, but it's just a double jump instead of a triple. Gary then shores up with 30-25, and then Denis is going to play 1-6 to prevent any of this 26-23 or 22 or 26-22 from happening. Gary plays 21-17, and after 12-16, we have 24-20. And I will pause and go back to this position because there's something very exciting here. Denis plays 7-11. And then to attack this exposed elbow here, Gary plays 26-22. Denis is then forced to play 16-19. And then after 27-23 with the double jump here, white is going to go up a piece, and they played it out a little bit further, but this is a loss for red. So really fantastic win from Gary here. But let's go back to that position, which I think is very instructive here. So again, Denis played this 7-11 to cover up after Gary plays 24-20. Now maybe some of you can see potentially what red has here. It's not easy at all though, so if you can't, no worries. But let's pause for a moment once again at this position with red to play. If Denis allows this double jump to happen by going 8-12, let's see what happens. So after the double jump, white's going to get a king. And then red can wait with 3-8 next. White must capture this piece. And now we have this triple jump, which should actually be enough to win this game because of these underdeveloped pieces here. So it just goes to show how you can go from a draw to a loss to a win just within a one move sequence. Really incredible stuff. But again, really well played. That is not an easy tactical shot to see, especially in a real-time tournament game. But once again, a really well played game from both players, but especially from Gary here. In this next game, Gary played against Keith Forbister, and finally they balloted a more even opening. Gary handling the red pieces and Keith handling the white pieces. And the opening they got was 11-15, 21-17, and 9-14. So pretty even. There is some red advantage here because red can choose the attack. And as you can see here, what Gary plays after Keith goes 25-21. Gary plays the 7-11, and then after 23-19, we can play into the Wilter here. Now, typically the Wilter formation will be 26-23, 5-9, 17-13, and then 3-7. So typical Wilter formation. Instead here, Keith plays this 17-13, which allows the attack on the double corner of red. And then after exchanging 24-19, white's double corner is a bit more exposed here. Gary develops the natural 8-11 and the natural counter of 26-23 is played next. The center attack 11-15 and then followed up by 32-28. And now once again developing toward the single corner and hoping that white does strike the double corner first with 22-18, which is exactly what happens in this game. A win was missed here actually by Gary. After this 22-18, what red can do is continue with 8-11, and then after the jump, go 11-15. It's a very, very powerful position for red, and it's also very instructive because it's very natural and also maybe not so easy to see because by instinct, you will want to counter that 22-18 attack by going 5-9. So let's go back to that position. It's a bit more natural to shore up the direct attack here as opposed to delaying and then going in with 8-11 and 11-15. So after the 1-5, which was played in the game, Keith develops 29-25, and then after 8-11, 30-26 is now played to create a column here, and then after 11-15, 19-16 is played. It's an even game, and the two opponents called it a draw at this point. They played a few more moves, but it is a good, solid, drawn game. Gary was also kind enough to share his first games that he ever played in checkers, and as I mentioned previously, his very first games were against Lubabalo Kondlo, a world champion. To me, that is incredibly impressive that the first time ever playing this game would come against a world champion. I am thinking back to my very first games that I ever played, and I'm pretty sure it was against a computer, and I don't recall exactly what that game was. So this is really great that Gary can always have these games as his first that he ever played. So he had the red pieces, and Kondlo had the white pieces, and Gary plays the strongest theoretical move on the board with 11-15. Kondlo plays 22-17, and then 9-14, a really great and strong opening for red. So, Gary, you're off to a tremendous start here. Kondlo plays 25-22, and then after 5-9, Kondlo plays 17-13, and then after 8-11, it's not the strongest formation here for red, but this is very, very common, especially for someone that's never played the game before, because you obviously want to go toward the center of the board, so this makes total logical sense. Kondlo packs the flank, and this move also makes sense. It's probably losing, actually, but again, it makes total sense. You're capturing control of the center of the board, and for never playing this game before, this is just Gary. This is wonderful. Kondlo plays 29-25, and then after 11-16, Kondlo is just going to dominate the center of the board here with after 26-22 and then 7-11 to follow up. Now some of you can probably see the tactical formation here, the tactical shot that Kondlo is going to execute, but I'll pause for a moment if you can study the board and see if you can find it. And if not, that is okay. But look, Kondlo plays here is this 19-15. So giving up two pieces. Capturing 17-10 first. Forcing this capture. And then I'm sure you can all see now the triple jump. They continue to play for several more moves, but the game is lost at this point. But what I'd say, Gary, for your very first game, truly tremendous. I mean, you attack the center of the board. Just an overdevelopment, which is quite common, and even some experts continue to do this today. Is the center control is so important, but it is easy to overcrowd it. And when you're playing a world champion, again, really, really impressive, especially for your very first game. I'd like to thank Gary Pollard for sharing these games with us and allowing us to not only learn, but to see what it's like playing for the first time, not only ever, but also in a major tournament. It's also encouraging to see the camaraderie in the checkers community and that we can all learn from each other regardless of skill level. Gary has helped Kondlo in preparation for his matches and has also been in correspondence with Dr. Jonathan Schaefer, the creator of Chinook. So if any of you would like to share any of your games, whether from a tournament or otherwise, please comment in the chat or feel free to message me. Thanks, as always, for watching.